Jesus on that.
It's a New Century Version. They got it reading like a storybook. Reading a novel.
I thought
if you turn this all the way down, it turns it off. No.
It's like they're reading a novel.
Literally click that.
And I don't really care.
Now it's all you.
They're New Century
It's
Version.
all you. Okay.
I call it the nearly correct version. But it's large print. So I
Alright, I just need one music.
prefer my purpose is the King James Version. Where Hebrews, his King James Version verifies what I've been saying. The debate of the rewrote Hebrews is a recent debate. It only started with the Revised Standard Version. Prior to that, Hebrews was called the Epistle of the Apostle Paul to the Hebrews.
Really?
Says it in his King James, says it in my King James. Because if you can't verify the inerrancy of the author if you don't know who the author is.
We got one empty.
Okay.
It's always been
Just
an
notice the
author. Of course, this is the first time I've been.
I know about
It's always been unknown author.
Yes.
It might be up to
Well, I'll take
it.
it.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Alright.
Oh, is that correct?
Do you guys have the fan on, or?
I turn the AC down. I keep the fans up because it makes it like a disco party here.
You got papers flying?
Yeah, that too. So, alright. So, on this side, I guess we'll just
What's
have.
in that cupcake? Oh, you didn't have it yet.
Let's see more comments, but I told Jenny to respond to people.
It's okay. I'm just a lot of garbage in, garbage
These
out.
are cream cheese filled. You're asking what's in them? Is it there's cream
They're
cheese?
actually cream cheese, Linda.
Yeah. Fun stuff.
Alright.
I got cream cheese frosting. Am I gonna be in the way?
Well, you're good. You're good. Hey, Junior, I'm gonna have you back up just a smidgen over here. Just like that. All right. Cool. All right. Well, just so everyone knows, everything's been recording for like the last 5 minutes on Facebook, so all of the secrets you just shared is definitely out on public. But for those joining us on Facebook Live, we welcome you here to Morning Star Church. I'm Pastor Trevor, and we have a whole crew of people with us here as we're beginning a brand new study in a new Wednesday night series looking at the book of Ruth. And so, before we begin, would someone like to pray for us? Anyone here would like to open in prayer? Oh, top right button. There you go. Perfect. All right. One of those buttons. You just hit each one until the thing explodes. I know.
It's actually nice, huh?
Who would like to open us up with prayer before we begin? All right. Everyone's pointing at Brian. So Brian, you've been voluntold. All right. Oh, sorry. I went to Paula. Well, the two become one flesh, so you know, one or the other, okay? Paula, would you open us up with prayer?
Sure. Thank you, Father, for your word and these two beautiful books. We pray that we would get the message that you want us to hear from these. Help us to take it to our mind and our heart. And Father, be with Trevor as he explains these things to us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Well, before we begin, I thought it would be kind of helpful to kind of set the stage a little. What you have in front of you is a packet. I'll provide it online after this. It says Ruth and Esther. These are actually the only two books of the Bible that have female names attributed to them. Okay, so that's one unique thing about the two books of all 66. These two dedicated to women in the Bible. But I wanted you guys to tell me a little bit about what is one of your favorite love stories. What is one of your favorite love stories?
Actually, Much Ado About Nothing, I think it is.
Okay, William Shakespeare, Much to Do About Nothing. And why does that stand out to you?
Because of how they duel with each other, but underneath they love each other, and it's beautiful how they. I can't explain it quickly. It's beautiful how it all played out.
Okay, so it's this great romantic story, and you see how it all plays out. Any other romantic stories out there?
I was educated as I like Beauty and the Beast.
Beauty and the Beast. Hey, I like that over there. You know.
That's one of my favorites.
Okay. Anyone else?
Your wife.
Any other love stories, Melissa?
Redeeming Love.
What's that?
It's an amazing
Oh yeah, that is a
about
good one.
a lady who just didn't understand true love and or trust and basically it was a gentleman who he was like a godlike figure in the story. It was basically a representation of God's redeeming.
It's kind of a takeoff on Hosea, is that right?
Yeah, take up on Hosea, and I think she was just living a totally different life, and
Oh, that is touching.
this man changed her life by being so patient with her and showing her what true love and commitment was. And it's a beautiful book. I recommend it. Redeeming Love
Redeeming
by
Love.
Francine Rivers.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Any other stories? So we have some William Shakespeare, some Disney, some Redeeming Love. I guess that's from
Francine Rivers.
Francine Rivers. Okay. Anyone on this side? So I think there's a lot of wonderful love stories, and they all kind of begin one way, where it's like two people seemingly love each other, but then what happens is they miss connection somehow, and then in the end, it ends in a wedding. There's two types of writings, and Shakespeare would have written to some of this, where he would write to the idea that you would have what's called, a comedy, and then you have what's called a tragedy. And I'm not saying that this story of Ruth would be a comedy, but when I say comedy, what comes to mind? I think of is it a funny story?
Yeah, but that's not what it is. Yeah.
So, comedies and tragedies are opposites of each other. Comedies are everyone's disconnected, but now it ends in a wedding. A story of tragedy is here you have your two lovebirds, and then everyone dies at the end. Okay? So in William Shakespeare, his famous tragedy would be like the story Hamlet. Okay? Everyone dies at the very end. Or 2 or 3 years ago, the Marvel series came out with the movie called Endgame. But before Endgame was, what was it called again? The one right before the last one. Anyways, the guy snaps his finger, the evil dude snaps his finger, and pretty much half of all the universe dies off. And then the movie just ends like that. Spider-Man dies, and everyone's like, what's going on? Our American culture has not experienced tragedies too often. There's not a lot of films made this way. It doesn't bring large audiences to end on a really sour note. But they are very vivid, and they hit you when you think about them.
Well, wasn't Romeo and Juliet a tragedy too?
Yeah, they die at the very end. Yep.
Macbeth.
Huh? Macbeth. So
Titanic.
Titanic. I still believe that there was enough room on that door for two people, but whatever. All right.
I totally agree.
I think so. It was like walnut wood, it was a hard oak wood. It would have lasted. All right. Well, the story of Ruth is a story like a comedy, where that you can open up your Bibles, and when you get there, you notice a few things about Ruth that might stand out. Number one, when you go through your Old Testament, it's like every other book in the Bible is super, super thick. And then you get to the story of Ruth, and then what happens? It's just 1 or 2 pages, and then you got to go through a lot of Samuel, a lot of Kings, a lot of Chronicles, and then finally you get to the very, very end. Oh, and then you have like those Hosea, Amos's, Obadiah's, and now you're back down to single pages. So, why do you think Ruth is just a 1-page story between Judges and Samuel? There's some ideas, and there's some church tradition that speak about, usually when you do an overview of a book, which is what we're doing today, and we'll jump into chapter 1 a little bit, and we'll finish chapter 1 next week. But you always want to ask yourself your question, who, what, when, where, and why. I mean, if you've ever been to an English class, that's pretty much what they always say. Got to answer these questions. So, who? What is this story about? It's about several people. Obviously, I guess we could throw out the word Ruth, but before you can read in there, any other people that are important?
Naomi.
Okay. Okay, so we have Ruth and Naomi
Boaz.
and Boaz. Okay. So we'll leave it there, all
I got
right?
one.
All the other people are supportive actors, okay?
I
So
got
they get
one.
secondary awards.
I got one.
We got the main 3. So what?
I got 2 of them.
We got them right here. Ruth, Naomi, Boaz. That's it. There you go. So, the what, all right? So what do we have here as what's happening in the story? What do you guys recall? We'll hit a few verses.
Famine.
Okay, there's a famine, okay? So, there's a famine, but then we're told over in a city called Bethlehem, which in
House of bread.
Hebrew, all right, is house of bread. So, there's famine, but then there's Bethlehem, all right?
There's death.
There's death, and then there's life.
Can I add something to the who, because it's important to the lineage?
Uh,
The Ephraimites, and that's a prophecy.
the F,
I can't say it, but the actual name they have,
The
the
Eph-
city, won't actually say, but it's actually in the prophecy about it.
the Ephraimites,
Yes, it actually it mentions that specifically, which is important for the lineage.
like Ephraim, Ephra.
What? I don't know what you're talking about. I'm
Uh,
sorry.
It's specifically to people from that city.
What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna-
From that city.
Just gonna do some random drawings here. The Ephraimites. Okay, so, all right. When? I just told you that this book here, all right, is smack dab.
Judges.
Okay,
At the time of Judges.
so if you open up your books, Ruth is smack dab between Judges and what other book?
First Samuel.
Okay, so there are some traditional understandings about, you might also say, who means like, who is it about? Who also may be written it. And some people say maybe Samuel wrote about this historic love story, or it could also be that they say,
Here, you continue. I'll write it. I looked it up.
okay, all right. I didn't know how to spell it. Okay. So you have first Samuel, and then you have a guy named Nathan. So they say maybe Nathan wrote about Ruth, or Samuel wrote about Ruth, and you're right after Judges. It's not to say that Ruth happened after Judges, but it was probably taking place during the time of Judges. Okay? And remember how, who said like we're beginning with a famine, things aren't going well, you're starting off with the first scene. Go ahead and, as we begin, would someone just read off chapter 1, verse 1? Who would like to read that out loud? Paula.
In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons.
And keep reading the second verse.
The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion.
Okay.
They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah.
Oh, there we go. There we go. So, here we have a guy by the name of Elimelech, right? Elimelech? All right, Elimelech. All right. It's an interesting Hebrew word. Elimelech
My God.
is really El plus Melech. Just kind of spell it out in English. El, which is
God.
probably what we have, is God.
King.
And Melech usually means king. So here's this guy who's like the king of God. You know, he's that's his name. And then take a look that here they're in a land where there's a lot of famine. They leave. He's got his wife and these 2 sons, and we're going to learn about who his wife's background is about. If you go ahead and read verses 3 and 4, it says, "But Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, he died, and she was left with her 2 sons. These took Moabite wives. The name of one is Orpah, and the name of the other is Ruth. And they lived there for about 10 years. And both Mahlon and Chilion died, so that the woman was left without her 2 sons and her husband." If that's not the beginning of a classic comedic story, you've got famine, you've got death, you've got emptiness. Things are not looking real well. And you could be very quick to skip over, but how long was Naomi away in this other land? She was there for 10 years. In that entire time, did she ever get married again? Did she ever have other kids?
No.
No. It's kind of like she feels, as we'll look at some of the dialogue, she kind of feels cursed by God. She feels like, it's kind of like the other version of Job. Like, what's going on? You've taken away everything I have, you've taken away my kids, my family, and how am I ever going to get out of this mess? You know, she feels, I bet you Naomi might believe that God is somehow sovereign in one way, but also he's not very loving, or he's not very compassionate. I kind of get a different flavor. I read through the story of Ruth a few times this week, and the more I read it, I kept looking at Naomi. And I think first we have like a high regard for Naomi, and then we have a high regard for Ruth. But as we kind of look at Naomi's decisions, I don't know. I get a little bit of a different flavor of what her faith was like. She seemed to be a woman who was very pragmatic over being principled. And so we'll take a look at what that looks like as we look at the comparisons of Ruth and the comparison of that of Naomi. So the who, the what's, the when, the where. Okay, Moab, all right. And I think that this might be one of the most important backdrops to the story about what type of awful situation we're dealing with. So these sons took for the Moabite people, women, and married them, Ruth and Orpah, okay? Do you guys know where their history comes from?
Who?
How many of you have ever met somebody and they says, I'm from Assyria, I'm not a Syrian, because the Syrians might have a bad reputation, right? Or people feel like they feel like in their lives they have been given a really bad reputation. You think people would have been proud to maybe be from the people of the Moabites? Okay.
Are they Canaanites?
They're one of the yikes. Go to Genesis 19, all right?
You're going to say what I'm going to say to that between him and
Go to Genesis 19. Everything goes back to Genesis, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Okay. This is, a very tough family history. Okay? You probably see the story, and towards the end, all right, beginning at verse 20, towards the end of chapter 19, God destroys what? Sodom. This is the story of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. And so here we have a family. Mrs. Lot is fleeing the city that's about to be destroyed. And what does she do? What does Mrs. Lot do?
Looks back.
Yeah, she does one of these double take things. And then boom, pillar of salt. Okay? So that leaves who? It was one family taken out. Here's Mrs. Lot. She's a pillar of salt. That leaves you with the husband and these two daughters.
Right.
Okay? Okay, well, the two daughters, in a very Naomian way of thinking, all right? I'm going to come up with a new word, Naomian way, all right? They're thinking to themselves, well, God just rescued us out of this city, but we're in a land where I can't find anybody to pass on the name of our father, so what do the two daughters do?
Had sex with their dad.
Yeah, they get him drunk and sleep with him in order to bear children, and that's definitely not the way in which God intended relationships to ever be. But they acted out of pragmatism instead of principle. Not yet. So, if you take a look over here, it says, here they slept with him and they bare children, and notice the names. Verse 36 and 37. Who would like to read those?
Thus both daughters of Lot were with child by their father. The older bore a son and named him Moab. He is the father of the Moabites to this day. The younger also bore a son and named him Ben-Ami. He is father of the Ammonites to this day.
So, there's your story of the Moabites. You would probably say, I'm not sure that I would want to tell people about my family history if that's where I came from. Jason?
The curse also, a male Moabite cannot be of the congregation even of the 10th generation. That's how wicked that culture was.
Yeah, and they were kind of thinking, would Ruth, if you look at her genealogy and timeline, around 11,000, oh, by the way, when? Probably somewhere between 1300 BC and about 1050 BC. And you mentioned that 10th generation of cursing. They were thinking maybe Ruth was actually the 11th generation. Just beyond the end of the curse.
That's Deuteronomy 23:3, by the way.
Well,
there's some Jewish commentary and they explain that.
I'll say, I just read in my commentary. It has something to do with that. That was brought up, but it wasn't like, that's not a strong point. But it is interesting. There is something about the Moabites, the cursing for 10 generations, and now we have what we're at today.
That's Deuteronomy 23:3, by the way.
On the cursing?
An Ammonite or Moabite shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord even to their 10th generation. Mm-hmm. Their descendants shall not enter into the assembly of the Lord forever.
Yeah.
What was that Deuteronomy what?
23:3.
So, but here's what's kind of neat. So, and the why. So, I think that there's a good themed verse for all of the book of Ruth. So you guys are going to go home tonight, and then the next week, I want you guys to read Ruth maybe once or twice before we meet next Wednesday. It's only 4 chapters, guys, so we can do it. All right, just like Philippians, just 4 chapters. It only took 16 weeks. Okay, so but here we are, the story of Ruth. Would someone go to chapter 4, and read verses 17 to 22. We have one lady read. If we can have a guy read, that would be great. 17 through 20. 17 through 22.
The neighbor went and gave him a name, saying, "A son has been born to Naomi." So they named him Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now these are the generations of Perez. To Perez was born Hezron, and to Hezron was born Ram, and to Ram Amminadab, and to Amminadab was born Nashon, and to Nashon Salmon, and to Salmon was born Boaz, and to Boaz Obed, and to Obed was born Jesse, and to Jesse was David.
Okay. Some interesting names in there beyond salmon. Okay. And that would be a great kid name, you know. No one, you know, you might see people named Naomi, people named Ruth. I've never met one person named Orpah. All right, we'll probably discuss why. Okay?
Yeah.
It's like you don't have anyone named Judas, you know, I don't know. So you just don't see that happening in families. So,
But Trevor, I have a question. You call this a comedy?
well, because where it ends in the Redeemer, it ends with a wedding. That Ruth has been taken in. You know, it kind of has a high finish love story ending. But it starts off with dire straits. And that's like a classic comedy. Whereas tragedy, everything's great, everything's perfect, you know, and then everything just messes up and falls apart. So, Jason.
Why should you state her personal decision for the actual Jewish people that decided to live outside of where God told them to live in the land and dwell amongst sinners and heathen, where he told them not to dwell with, let alone associate with? So that's looking at the point of they put themselves out there rather than trusting God to vision this land you've given to me. I'm going to go do my own thing in another land where there's no famine.
Well, they were put into the promised land. They were living there.
But they left the promised land.
They did.
Yeah.
They did.
So let's take a look at a few things here. I point out the very last verses here because what's being established in the book of Ruth is God's ultimate faithfulness. And I want to point out another word, and it's going to be the word hesed, where you would probably know it as steadfast love. Okay? There's two things that come out of this. No need to turn there, but there was a great covenantal promise that was given to Abraham in Genesis chapter 17. He said that I will always be with you, right? And I will promise you a family of many nations. You're going to be the father of many nations. Then you can jump into 2 Samuel, where God, thousands of years later, is talking now to David. And says in 2 Samuel chapter 7, I'm going to have one who's going to come after you, who's going to rule on the throne of that you've been on, and he's going to rule for how long? Forever. Okay? It's this ultimate promise that God will never give up on his end of the deal. So that type of love, which we call the Hesed love, it is like, I know in Greek terms we like to say there's phileo, and then there's, agape. And agape is like a very deep love. Well, Hesed is like the Hebrew counterpart. It's a deep love. And you're going to see this word come up a few times here as we read through chapters 1 through 4. This type of steadfast love. God being very, very patient and guiding this whole thing. And then the other thing that might be worth noting in here is that in that lineage, what do you see happening in here? At the very end. Here's Boaz, who had a son named Obed, and Obed who fathered who? Jesse. And Jesse, who fathered who? David. Interesting lineage. Everyone go to Matthew chapter 1. Okay? Great lineages over there. Matthew chapter 1. And if you just look at the first 6 verses, and we'll put this as a placeholder. So, it says here, the book of genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham, Abraham the father of Isaac, Isaac the father of Jacob, Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers, and Judah the father of Perez and Zerah by Tamar, and Perez the father of Hezron, and Hezron the father of Ram, and Ram, the father of Amminadab, and Amminadab, the father of Nahshon, and Nahshon, the father of Salmon, and Salmon, the father of Boaz, by Rahab, and Boaz, by the father of Obed, by who?
His mother was Ruth.
Interesting. The connections now are being made between the Old Testament covenantal God, who is always faithful with a steadfast love, is saying his ultimate promise will be finally fulfilled in the Son Jesus Christ, who shares this lineage. So here's this very unique connection. And I think that there's some people, when you hear a story, a love story, about some kingdom, some princess, in dire straits, it always starts off with what? Once upon a time, there lived this princess, lived in a really tall tower, and la-di-la-di-da, right? Who's that? Woman with long hair? Rapunzel? Right? Yeah.
Rapunzel,
So when we talk about love stories, we're always saying, Ruth is just like a really nice story. But here, the genealogy is telling you something different. I mean, number one, it's in a very real setting. Moab, it's in a real place, and they're connecting genealogies together. So this is a historic book. This isn't a fairy tale, okay? And so don't let anyone lead you astray and say, oh, those Old Testament books in the Bible, it's just a bunch of allegories, they never really happen, but it's trying to tell you some spiritual piece or something of that nature. There's a realness to the story of Ruth. And so I think it takes us away from this idea, hey, good to have you join us, Lee. And Lee, you can sit right over here. That spot right there. So I just want you to feel that there's a realness in the story of the book of Ruth, that it's not some fairy tale. So let me take a look at one last thing over here. And Ruth chapter 14. Ruth chapter 4.
You just told us it was 4 chapters.
Yes.
The extended
That's the fairy tale
version.
version. Not yet. No. All right. So it says here, then the women said to Naomi, blessed be the Lord.
Where are you?
Oh, sorry. Chapter 4, verse 14. Maybe if there'd be one other pinnacle verse. Chapter 4, verse 14. Okay, I'm going to move this over. Am I blocking the board when I'm standing there?
No.
Oh.
Your computer's got it there.
Oh, all right. Well, we don't need that. So, all right. So I want to read chapter 4, verse 14.
The women said to Naomi, praise be to the Lord who this day has not left you without a kinsman redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel.
There you go. That probably would be the other pinnacle verse. Oh, what is this book even about? Okay. So we have a few printouts. And by the way, I think there's some other things for us to be considering. Because when you read this on your own, you're going to notice some words that pop up over and over again. But then also, you're going to see these contrasts between these two women. And I think the first thing, okay, we've just about finished the Gospel of John. We have about one more sermon, not this Sunday. You're going to have a wonderful preacher come in this Sunday, Craig Starley. But when we come back on the following Sunday, we're going to finish John 21. And in the Gospel of John, probably one of the favorite parts that I like about that book of the Bible is that it talks about light and darkness. It talks about the truth and the love, truth and the lie. It talks about love, and then talks about hate. So when John writes about the story of the life and times of Jesus Christ, he's using these contrasting moments. And this writing here of Ruth is beautiful poetry, or at least it's poetic, in the sense of it, there's contrast that we're going to see between Ruth and Naomi, how things begin in the beginning and how they finish in the end. Even the names. You know what the word Naomi actually means in Hebrew?
Bitter?
No.
No.
Close.
Oh, that's
Delight,
right.
pleasure.
Yeah, so it means pleasant. Okay?
We're just,
Oh,
no,
that's just.
I wasn't always too deep.
And then they go visit a place, and it's called Mara.
That means.
And that means bitter. Okay? We're going to see another contrast that comes up in Ruth, and that's going to be that right now, Naomi, she is feeling empty. Okay? And that is going to be changed into a part of the story where we're going to see fullness. Okay? Naomi, she's going to describe her dire situation where her husband died for 10 years, she's not met another man, and now her sons have died, and she's got these two women, and she don't know what to do with them. They better go off and find out, they need to go on Bachelor or something. They need to go on some show and get hitched, all right? Because if they stay with her, well, they're just going to be like Naomi. She's good as dead. So here we have dead, and here we have life. And so as you start reading through this, these kind of contrasts come up pretty vividly, all right? And, I want to put up there, it's not really with my notes, but I've already mentioned it once before. And that's this. And maybe there's a good takeaway tonight about how us Christians act. Sometimes we think our best ways of solving things is to be pragmatic. Okay? It's that get it done, fix attitude that we all have. It's well, if I can just get A to connect to B to equal C, then boom, there you go. Fix the problem, easy way out, get it done. That's pragmatic thinking.
And what's the problem with that?
We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it. If it's done without, if you look at the word by itself, it can be good. But I'm trying to compare it to another P word because that's what they teach you, to always use words that somehow start with the same thing, okay? So pragmatic versus principle. And so if you look at these two things playing off of each other, what's the difference between someone who makes a pragmatic choice versus someone who makes a principled choice?
There's a belief.
Changes in the moment of the situation.
Okay, so this could be based off circumstance, right?
And selfishness, that's good for me.
Okay, maybe some selfishness in there.
Principle operates on truth.
Ooh, I like that. Okay, true. I give principled also another answer because we're Morning Star, we're Christians, we believe in God's Word, we are faith-based people. So we ought to be Christians who make faith-based decisions.
That's standard.
Yeah, standards, things that we follow. But not just any standard, biblical standards, So we don't just try to make decisions that we think based out of our own goodness. And think about this. What time period is the story of Ruth again?
Judges.
In the book of Judges? What's the one line that could probably sum up Judges?
Everyone did what was right in his own eyes.
Yeah, that's pragmatic thinking, Oh, in order to get this done, I'm just going to do this. Okay, so what did Mrs. Lot, what did the daughters do to help make sure the lineage would pass on? Oh, they did a completely horrendous thing that pretty much marked the rest of their family history. Thank you very much, okay? Pragmatic,
They thought they were doing
not
right.
principled.
They thought they were doing right,
Yeah.
but they weren't.
And now take a look at Naomi, and maybe we'll spend a little bit of time here, as we only have a few last 10 minutes. So Would someone like to read just the very first, read from verse 6 to 14.
Where?
Chapter 1. We'll start there.
When she heard in Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of his people by providing food for them, Naomi and her daughters-in-law prepared to return home from there. With her 2 daughters-in-law, she left the place where she had been living and set out on the road that would take them back to the land of Judah. Then Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's home. May the Lord show kindness to you as you have shown to your dead and to me. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband." Then she kissed them, and they wept aloud, and said to her, "We will go back with you to your people." But Naomi said, Return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have any more sons who could become your husband? Return home, my daughters. I am too old to have another husband. Even if I thought there was still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and then gave birth to sons, would you wait until they grew up? Would you remain unmarried for them? No, my daughters. It is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has gone out against me. At this they wept again. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her.
So, some of the things we just taught. Any words just kind of lift off of the page that we mentioned, reflect. Naomi thought that she was good as what? Dead, right? And, oh, I put it over there. Whatever, I put it over there. But she said that she was feeling what? Bitter. Okay. So I'll throw that back over here. Okay. And,
Abandoned by the Lord.
okay, abandoned. Going to the word empty, dead, bitter. Okay. And
Mara means
Old.
bitter, that's why you put it.
that's what I did, yeah. So, when it says bitter in here, in the Hebrew, it's Mara, which goes back to a story in Moses' day, where he took a stick
The water.
and threw it into the pond of Mara, which, by the way, we have a new lake over here. We have Lake ARP, or Lake ARP, and you said we have 2 ducks?
2 ducks.
We have 2 ducks right out over there. Hey,
Why is it called Lake AARP?
someone's, huh?
Why is it called Lake AARP?
Just one.
Oh, no, just 1A.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Associated Reformed Presbyterian.
Oh,
Yeah, that's what our church is
okay,
about.
all right.
But
You
Lake
got me.
AARP is for everyone 65 and up get to hang out. So, but that's, no, I don't
Lay
know.
down.
Um,
Lay down.
so they cut out all the bushes over here, and then now we got this cool little pond.
Is there any carp in there?
Definitely not. It's about 3 weeks old. So, all right. It's just with all the new rain, so now we got
Retention
pond.
pond.
So-
give me a chance to say something.
Not yet. I'm on a roll here. So, let's
Okay.
keep going here. So, here we see several moments of a very harsh start, okay? And 3 times, Ruth is going to plead with these daughters. Listen, I'm empty. I'm good as dead.
Oh,
You can't, I'm old. You can't, what am I going to do for you guys? What? Are you going to wait for me to have a kid and then wait for that kid to become old enough that you can marry them? This isn't going to work, guys. But I got a pragmatic way of thinking about this. I got a great idea. Just, you go off, go find other husbands, the Moabite land where you came from, and you'll be good.
I didn't catch
Not a
it.
bad proposition.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch who the 3 pleas were from.
The first one is what Naomi says. So Naomi's going to her 2 daughters-in-law. Okay? So Naomi had 2 sons, they died, but their wives are still around. So Naomi says to her 2 daughters-in-law and says to Orpah and to Ruth, please go to another land, go back to your God, and don't stay with me. So that's the first plea. Okay? And Orpah and Ruth stay with her. Okay? And then Naomi goes back to them, okay, a second time. And it says here, so it says, verse 8, the first moment, go return each of you to her mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find rest in each of you in the house of the husband. And then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices, and they wept. So, the word there, she kissed them, and then they left, is kind of like, you know, like Italian families, or maybe another, I don't know, whatever, Greek families. You like kiss someone on the cheek and you say goodbye. You know, it's the proper way of saying, I'll see you later. And they cry over that, but then they say, I'm going to stay. So then Naomi comes back and she says this. She says, and they said to her, no, we will go with you to your people. But then Naomi said, pragmatically, turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters, and go your way, for I am too old and I'm too old to even have a husband. If I should say I have hope, even if I should have a husband this night and should bear sons, would you therefore wait till they were grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, for it is exceedingly bitter to me for your sake that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me. And they lifted up their voices, and again, Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth hung to her. Some other contrasts. Mm-hmm. So Naomi kissed both of them to say goodbye. In the second plea, Orpah took it. Okay? Orpah leaves. And we don't know anything else about her. Kind of opens up some ideas. What was her life like? Heading back to the Moabites. What was she doing? You know, there's no other mention of her.
Her name actually means stiff-necked.
Stiff-necked. Okay. Cool. I mean, not cool for her.
For you, Pearl, what's this up?
Yeah. Sure. What you got?
Looking at the bowl.
Uh-huh.
Let's talk about Noah in the Bible.
I might get a little off track there.
Let's talk about how many children he had.
Well, we're going to talk about the fullness of children at the very
That's what I'm talking about.
Well, we'll get there later. When we study Noah, I'll do there. But take a look at this, guys. So, verses 19 through, verses 15 through 18. Would someone go ahead and read that? And then we'll finish there tonight for our study.
And Naomi said, see, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her God. Return after your sister-in-law. And Ruth said, urge me not to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go. And where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. You can see the stiff-necked reason here. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you. When Naomi saw that Ruth was determined to go with her, she said no more.
Take a look at this. And this is very interesting here. And it says, I just want to write it down. Take a look at Ruth's response. First plea, go away. Be pragmatic. You'll be better off in a better situation. Based on circumstance, this would be better. Not a very faith-based principled decision. Second plea, please go. But Orpah says, you know what? I'll take it. Junior, you can take a seat right over there. All right?
Sit right now.
All right, thank you. But here's the third plea, okay? The third plea over here says that Ruth does the exact opposite of what Boaz. Where she clung to her on the second time, she's really holding on tight. And Ruth says something powerful. She says, I want your God will be my God. But then whose name does Ruth invoke right afterwards? This is like a Peter moment of the New Testament. Take a look at this. Ruth declares something true. You said about truth-based decisions. God had revealed himself to Ruth in this moment. She knows who the true God is and not her gods. You know, she's saying Yahweh, and she says, and that's going to be my Lord. You know, we finished last Sunday with doubting Thomas, and we don't give him enough credit, but he says, my Lord and my God. And like I said, Ruth is having a Peter moment. In fact, if anything, maybe Peter is having a Ruth moment, okay? It should be that way around. Peter is having a Ruth moment where Peter says to Jesus, something's revealed to him, and he declares what about who Jesus is? What does Peter say?
Christ.
You are the Christ. And Jesus responds, the only way that you would have known is that God, through the Holy Spirit, will reveal that to you. And so, evidently, Ruth has had that experience. And she knows where the truth is, and she's going to go after the truth. She's now not making a pragmatic decision. In some ways, in our Christian pragmatic life, we probably are not going to choose easy roads. Because our faith-based, principled, truthful life tells us that we should live our life on faith-based decisions than solely on pragmatic decisions. It doesn't mean that we're thoughtless people, but it means that we're principled people. We should stand up for something. We're Christians, it's not like we just dilly-dally, we don't stand up for anything. You know, whatever is true today is what I'll stand up for, and I guess whatever's true tomorrow, then I'll stand up for that. You know? We have real things that we trust in. So, maybe as we close, how do you see, I think in my reading of this, I guess I had a lot of high regards for Naomi, but it kind of seems like she's kind of not falling in line with believing in God's sovereignty over things. Like she's kind of, we'll see later in chapter 2, remember the threshing floor? It says, okay, so this is how you're going to get it in. All right, you're going to go on eHarmony. You're going to put up a great profile picture. That's probably not you, or if it is you, it's you from like 25 years ago, right? And when he sees you, you'll look attractive enough, and then hopefully that'll set the stage, and then he'll want to, wife you. Okay, that's kind of like that's another pragmatic thing, right? Melissa.
Although Ruth right now may seem like she's questioning why God would have her in this situation, to the point where she said,
Wait, Naomi?
Naomi.
No, Naomi, I'm sorry.
Sure.
I said Ruth. So even though Naomi seems like she's acting in the moment, questioning why have you put me through this, and even saying the hand of the Lord is against me, like, I can't help but think about the impact that she had as a believer in the true God on her daughter-in-law, Ruth, to the point where Ruth says, no, I will follow you. I will follow your God.
She saw something.
She must have been an example for what it means to follow the only true God. Mm-hmm. Even though in this temporary situation, she's like, why am I going through this? Why am I going through this?
I mean, in our most difficult, dire circumstances, our faith gets shaken and we make poor decisions that aren't very Christ-like, and we waver, and here's Naomi wavering right now. But then maybe, that image of Christ, clearly before this moment, Ruth spent 10 years with her. So maybe there is something to say about what Naomi was up to, but we kind of don't know. Jason? And then we have to close pretty soon.
Two things on it. One is the Goel, near came from the Redeemer.
Yeah.
Which we'd be remiss to
Well, we'll get there when we get there.
I'm just saying, it goes into that, and remember we had a discussion, we talked about one of the biggest things I said about the Redeemer, that concept. Also, they heard that God had blessed Israel, and that word came to them, so that means they had been in contact between Israel and her at one point, telling them, hey, the famine here is no longer going on, so she decided to return to that. There's nothing here for me, so I'm going to go back there to die. You know, her mind is set that way, but somehow, so my point is maybe Ruth heard that.
Maybe so. Good to share.
Things went around that time.
It's disappointing to me that Naomi didn't say, come back and meet the people that follow God,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and
Right.
come to the faith of my people.
Yeah. Yeah, there's that too, you know. Anything over here?
I don't know that I totally agree that she was pragmatic on the threshing floor and so forth, because that was kind of a
There's a
there
cultural...
was somewhat of a cultural reason
with-
for that.
But the keeping the blanket off of the feet has some cultural sign. Maybe that might have been trying to start something before it might normally happen in God's timing, or like I'm gonna push God's plan forward, you know, something like that. But I hear where you're coming from on that.
Yeah.
Well, I want us to finish then here. Then, how do you think today? How well are Christians living by Christian principles over being just pragmatic people? How are we doing with that today? How are you doing with that today?
Yeah, I was
Day
gonna
late and
say
dollar
it
short.
goes.
That's how I'm doing.
Yeah, a day late and a dollar short. You know, we have to evaluate ourselves. How quick are we to just...
We're divorcing at the same rate almost as the rest of the population, and Christians have abortions. I mean,
Yeah, there's...
Homosexuality.
The church is becoming almost as liberal as it is conservative now.
Yes.
The divorce rate is about the same. Biblical literacy is like on the decline. We got other secular guys that know Scripture better than some of us Christians. It's like we're losing ground on being deeper disciples.
Mm-hmm.
I want us in the next 5 weeks to become deeper disciples of Jesus Christ. That in 5 weeks,
Amen.
you can say that I've grown closer to the Lord, and I don't know what type of dire straits you might be in, but walk through this love story between Ruth and Boaz, and maybe as we get to the climactic end, you might have somewhere in your life your own wedding image of just joy, fullness, life. That's where I want to see us at the end of 5 weeks. Okay? Amen. Well, guys, I'm looking forward to this study.
Me too.
If it's so good we can go into Esther, we can also change course and pivot into something else. But I think this would be a really, really good book. I want to say thank you so much for coming here, for enjoying desserts over kind of an overview and looking a little bit at chapter 1. And again, look at these things. Take a picture of this later as we leave, and read through this book once or twice and see if you see it just pop up. And then when we come back, we'll have little discussion groups, and we'll see you guys, see where you find this stuff. Okay?
And this Bible, it's only, Ruth and Esther's only 8.5 pages. I can go for that.
Yeah.
And Stu G, a musician, says, the message constantly surprises me.
Yeah, there you go. Well, listen, who would like to finish us in prayer? Sorry, close us in prayer. Sounds like that's it. All right. Kevin, would you close us in prayer? That'd be all right? All right.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us all together. Thank you for the purpose of this study is to bring us closer to you. Would you help us understand that everything in the Bible is Old Testament concealed, New Testament revealed, and how we can get to understand that the genealogy of Christ is just as important as it reveals the history as fact, not some fictional story. And as we're led, as the Spirit leads us, being led in the understanding that we're all here to learn from godly people more about you every day. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Well, guys, thank you for joining us online. I'll see you guys next week. And guess what? You online people don't get the desserts, all right? So, more for us. Join us next week. Like and share. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Any other plugs? Sunday service, 10 a.m. You should be there. And anything else? All right.
We love you guys.
Hey, we love you guys. All right. I'll see you guys later. Dennis, you just swipe left.
Yeah, but wait a minute. That's
Oh.
behind me.
Oh, YouTube, yes. You got 30 seconds. In fact, let's see. Do we have any? Probably doesn't tell you comments, does it? Yeah, when it does multi-stream, it doesn't tell you comments.
Have you ever read Shattered Dreams by Larry Crabb?
No.
That's on the book of Ruth. Might want to look at that.
Okay.
Very interesting.
It's called what?
Shattered Dreams.